I thought proposing to the woman I loved would be the happiest moment of my life, but instead she said no. What I didn't expect was the message I'd get later that night from her best friend. And what started as a few kind words ended up changing everything I thought I knew about love. Hello, you're watching Trelene, real stories with real twists. Let's get started. I'm Kevin. I'm 27. I live on the north side of Austin with a roommate, and I work at a small marketing agency that builds landing pages for local businesses. I'm the guy who writes the copy and obsesses over button text. Most days I drink too much coffee, bike to the office when it's not 100 durders, and call my mom on Sundays. I've been dating Grace for just over 2 years. She's 30, works in finance, reads hardcovers on planes, and color codes her Google Calendar. I thought we were headed in one direction. That week I couldn't sit still. I kept checking the ring box like it was a live thing that might jump out of my drawer. I had the restaurant reservation set for Saturday. I told the host by phone, Soros. No fireworks, no speech by a waiter, just a quiet table by the window. He laughed and promised to keep it simple. On Saturday, I got a haircut, ironed a white shirt, and rehearsed what I'd say on the drive downtown. Don't make it a performance, I told myself. Just tell her the truth. That I loved her steadiness, her laugh that showed only to people she trusted, the way she could turn a mess into a plan in 30 seconds. In my head, I saw the night as a clean line forward. Grace arrived right on time. Black dress, hair in a low bun, that clean perfume she liked. In the first seconds, I felt her studying me. "You're very dressed up," she said with a small smile. "Big client pitch a Monday," I joked. She didn't buy it. We were shown to the table. The room was warm, glass and wood, the kind of place where people talk in low voices. We ordered sparkling water, then a bottle of wine. Then she asked about my week. I tried to answer normally, she tried too, but the air between us had a shape. When the main courses were cleared, I felt my heart punch my ribs. I nodded to the host across the room. He gave the slightest nod back and looked away like we had agreed it was nothing. I put my napkin on the table, reached into my jacket pocket, and slid off my chair onto one knee. I didn't make a speech. It felt wrong to rehearse love. I just held the small open box and said, "Grace, I want to spend my life with you." For a breath, she looked at me with this soft shock, like someone hearing their name in a crowd. Then her eyes flicked to the ring, then back to me, and something closed. Her hand went to her throat the way it does when she's deciding between two bad options. "Kevin," she said quietly, and the sound of my name told me everything. She shook her head once, not angry, not terrified. "Just sure, I can't, I'm sorry." The room didn't gasp, no one clapped. A fork clinked on porcelain at the table behind us, and a server glided by like nothing had happened. I stayed on my knee 1 second too long, then put the ring back in the box and stood up. My face felt hot. She reached for my hand, then pulled back halfway, then settled for folding her hands in her lap. We paid. The host moved like a ghost, professional and invisible. Outside the door, the night was warm and dry, a steady hum of traffic and conversation from the patio. We stood under the awning like coworkers after a meeting. "I don't want to hurt you," she said, eyes on the sidewalk. "I don't feel that kind of love anymore. I kept trying to get it back. I thought time would do it. It didn't." I nodded because I didn't know what else to do with my head. "Is there someone else?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. "No," she said quickly. "I swear, this is about me. It's not fair to say yes to you when I can't give you what you think you're getting." I opened my mouth and 1,000 sentences fought to get out. Only one made it. "Thank you for telling me the truth." We walked to the car. The valet jogged off, returned with my hatchback, handed me the keys like it was any other Saturday. I drove her to her place in silence, hands at 10 and 2, the ring box burning a square into my pocket. A couple crossed the street with takeout boxes and laughed at some private joke. A guy carried a plant to his car. Everything normal, like my life hadn't just been edited without my permission. In front of her building, she unbuckled slowly. "Can we talk tomorrow?" she asked. "I think we should, but I need to sit with this tonight." "Okay," I said. It was the only word that didn't break me in half. She touched my arm, not a hold, not a hug, just her fingers, light, then gone. "You're a great man, Kevin," she said. "I'm sorry." She stepped out, closed the door, and walked toward the lobby with that same posture she always had, shoulders set, chin level. I watched until the glass doors took her in. Then I sat there with the engine running and my jaw clenched until it hurt. My phone buzzed with a group text from a friend's making plans for the game on Sunday. I turned it face down. The car filled with the small sound of the air vent. On the drive home, I didn't cry. Not because I'm brave, because I felt hollow in the way that makes crying impossible. At a red light, I took the ring box out and looked at it on the passenger seat. It looked like a gadget, like a thing you could return for store credit. Back at the apartment, my roommate wasn't home. The living room smelled like detergent. I put the ring in the back corner of my sock drawer, stood in the dim hallway, and listened to the building brief. I wanted to call someone, but I couldn't imagine hearing my own story come out of my mouth. I brushed my teeth too hard, washed my face, and lay on my back, staring at the ceiling fan. When I finally slept, it was shallow, cut by alarms I hadn't set. Every few minutes, my brain replayed the moment her mouth formed the word no. It didn't come with anger or drama. It came with certainty. That was the part that kept cutting. In the morning, I woke before the sun and sat on the floor with my laptop open, reading emails I couldn't process. I drafted a message to the host to apologize for making their night weird, then deleted it. I made coffee and didn't drink it. I put on running shoes and didn't leave. I kept hearing my own sentence from the restaurant, the small one that survived the pileup. Thank you for telling me the truth. It sounded like a line from someone older than me, someone I hoped I would become. I didn't feel like that person yet, but it was the only solid thing in the wreckage, so I held on to it. I woke up on Sunday feeling like I'd been in an accident that left no visible injuries. My phone showed 3 unread messages from Grace, short ones. The first said she hoped I'd gotten home safe. The second said she hadn't slept. The third just said, "Can we talk later?" I didn't answer. I stared at the words until the screen went black. The silence in my apartment was too neat, too clean. I made coffee, stood by the window, and watched a couple walking their dog along the sidewalk. The normal rhythm of other people's lives felt like mockery. By noon, I gave in and texted her back. Sure, we met at her apartment that afternoon. She looked tired but composed the way she always did after crying, like she'd already reorganized her emotions into labeled folders. She offered me water, sat across from me on the couch, and said, "I owe you an explanation." I didn't interrupt. "You didn't do anything wrong, Kevin." She said, "You've been wonderful, but I don't feel that kind of love anymore. I've been trying to force it back for months. It's not fair to either of us." Her voice was steady, but I could hear that tiny tremor that happens when someone's holding the wall up with both hands. I nodded, though my throat felt thick. "You could have said something before last night," I said quietly. She looked down. I kept hoping I'd feel it again. I thought maybe I was just scared of commitment. But when you pulled out the ring, I realized I was scared because I didn't want to say yes. It wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was honest. I didn't make a scene. No begging, no guilt. I just said, "Okay," because any longer sentence might have broken me. She tried to smile, but it came out as a half breath. When I left, she hugged me the way people hug someone moving to another state. Outside, the sun was sharp, almost too bright. I got in my car and sat there, both hands on the wheel, not starting the engine. It was over. And somehow, that felt unreal. That evening, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Hey, this is Francis. I know this is random, but I heard what happened. I'm really sorry. You didn't deserve that." Francis, Grace's friend, the one I'd met twice at small gatherings. She was younger, maybe 25, with that easy laugh that fills a room. I hesitated before replying. "Thanks. It's been a weird weekend," she replied almost instantly. We all thought she'd say yes. Honestly, I would have. I stared at that last line for a while. I didn't know what she meant. Sympathy or something else, but it hit me in the chest anyway. We kept talking. Just simple stuff at first. Work, movies, random complaints about Austin traffic. But every few messages, she said something that landed too close to the truth. "Grace overthinks everything. You're the kind of guy who means what he says. That scares people like her." I didn't know how to respond, so I just sent a smiley emoji. She laughed at it and said, "You're terrible at texting." For the first time that weekend, I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was human. By midnight, we were still talking. I caught myself smiling at the phone and then felt guilty for it. I barely knew her. She was Grace's friend. Still, something about her tone was grounding, like a conversation with someone who already knew the worst thing about you and didn't flinch. When I finally put the phone down, I realized I hadn't thought about the proposal in hours. That realization brought its own kind of guilt, but also relief. The next morning at work, everything looked the same. The same coffee stains on the counter, the same hum of keyboards, but it all felt different. I caught myself checking my phone for a text from Francis. When it buzzed during a meeting, my pulse jumped. Hey, coffee later. I promised not to bring up your tragic dinner proposal. I laughed quietly, earning a look from my boss. That evening, we met at a small cafe near the river. No plan, no expectations. She showed up in a denim jacket and sneakers, hair tied back, looking like someone who didn't need to prove anything. She started the conversation like we were old friends. So tell me the truth, she said, stirring her drink. Was the restaurant at least good? Honestly, yeah, great risotto, terrible memories. She grinned. Well, next time we'll go back just to replace the memory. The way she said, we caught me off guard. I didn't correct her. We talked for almost 2 hours about movies, family, bad first dates, work stories. No awkward pauses, no forced smiles. When she laughed, it was unfiltered. When she listened, she actually listened. I drove home that night feeling lighter. But then the guilt crept back in. Grace's face, her quiet apology, the ring still hidden in my drawer. It all came rushing back. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Just kindness. From a friend. Still, as I lay in bed, the conversation replayed in my head. The way Francis said, I'd have said yes. Those words echoed longer than Grace's no. The next day, Francis texted again. You know, some people spend their whole lives waiting for the right timing. Sometimes they just need the right person. I didn't know what she meant exactly, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something alive, something that didn't hurt. And for the first time in days, I felt like maybe my story hadn't ended at that table after all. By Wednesday, the silence with Grace had turned into a quiet routine. No texts, no calls, no closure beyond what had already been said. I tried to keep my focus at work, but my brain kept drifting. Every little thing reminded me of her, the smell of her coffee order, the way she always double-checked the thermostat before leaving. You don't notice the habits of love until they stop echoing around you. That afternoon, I went out for coffee during lunch. The cafe near the office was buzzing, people talking over laptops and screens. I ordered my usual black coffee, found a corner table, and scrolled aimlessly through emails. When I looked up, I saw her, Frances, standing at the counter. She spotted me almost immediately. She waved with that half smile that already looked familiar. Hey, heartbreak boy, she teased, walking over. I laughed despite myself. Please don't make that my new title. She sat across from me without asking. Too late, it's catchy. Then her tone softened. Seriously, though, how are you holding up? I've been better. I said, you don't need to worry about me. I kind of do, she said. Grace is my friend, but I also think you deserved a better ending. There was no hesitation in her voice, no fake pity, no awkward sympathy. She said it like a fact. That made it hit harder. We ended up talking for an hour. She told me about her job at a small art studio downtown, about her landlord who kept forgetting to fix the elevator, and about her obsession with vintage cameras. It was the kind of talk that didn't feel forced. She had that rare mix of humor and empathy, light and depth in the same breath. When she stood to leave, she said, you know, if I'd been in Grace's place, I would have said yes. It froze me for a second. I didn't know whether to smile or pretend I hadn't heard it. She looked right at me, calm and serious, then gave a small shrug and walked out. The rest of the day, I couldn't stop replaying that moment. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Not flirtatious, not dramatic, just honest. Like she decided it was better to say it out loud than leave it hanging between us. That night she texted, sorry if that came out weird earlier. I typed, deleted, retyped. Finally, I sent it didn't. It just surprised me. Good surprise or bad? I haven't decided yet. Let me know when you do. I'll buy the next coffee. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, smiling like an idiot. The next day, she showed up outside my office around 6:02. I figured you'd need fresh air more than another coffee, she said, holding two takeout cups. Anyway, we walked down by the river, the light turning gold over the water. I told her about the proposal night, about how Grace looked when she said no. Not cruel, not distant, just done. Frances listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said quietly, "She's always been afraid of people who make her feel too much." I stopped walking. What does that mean? She plans everything. Her whole life is about control. You can't control love, and that scares her. Her words didn't sound like gossip. They sounded like truth told with care. We sat on a bench by the water. She looked out over the river and said, "You know, life's funny. People say no to what they need and yes to what's safe." I glanced at her, wondering if she realized how personal that sounded. She turned and met my eyes. "Don't look at me like that," she said, smiling softly. "I'm not trying to steal you from anyone." "I'm not anyone's to steal," I said. That made her laugh, but there was warmth behind it. She reached out and touched my sleeve, just a small gesture, light and natural. "Good," she said. "Then maybe we can just be two people who needed to meet at the wrong time." The evening drifted into calm conversation. We talked about travel, food, movies we both loved. Every time she laughed, something inside me loosened. I hadn't realized how long I'd been holding my breath since the breakup. When I dropped her off at her apartment, she leaned against the car door and said, "You seem lighter." "Maybe I am," I said. She nodded. "Then that's something." That night I couldn't sleep. Not from sadness this time, but confusion. I kept asking myself what this was. Rebound? Friendship? Something else trying to form out of the ashes? Then around midnight, my phone buzzed again. Just wanted to say, "You made today better. Hope that's okay." I wrote back, "It is. Thank you." And right before I fell asleep, I caught myself smiling again, different from before. Not because I'd forgotten Grace, but because for the first time I wasn't thinking only about her. By the next week, Frances had quietly become part of my days. Not in some dramatic whirlwind way, but in the small, natural ways people slide into your life without you planning it. We texted every morning. She'd send something like, "Coffee or is chaos yet?" And I'd reply, "Both." At first I thought it was just friendship. Then I started noticing how often I caught myself waiting for her messages or replaying things she said just to feel that warmth again. On Thursday evening, she texted dinner. I found a place that doesn't require reservations or emotional baggage. I sent her a laughing emoji and said, "Lead the way." The restaurant was a cozy little Italian spot tucked behind a bookstore. Dim lights, quiet chatter, the smell of basil, and roasted garlic everywhere. She was already seated when I walked in, wearing a loose beige sweater and her hair down. She looked effortless. When she saw me, she smiled. That same open, genuine smile that made it impossible not to relax. "Okay," she said once we ordered. "Rule number one, no talking about Grace." "Deal," I said. "Rule number two, we'll make it up as we go." We talked for hours about childhood ambitions, dumb mistakes, family stories. She told me she used to paint before work took over her time. I told her I once tried to write a novel and gave up after 5 pages. It wasn't flirty, it was real. The kind of conversation that builds something between two people without either of them realizing it. After dinner, we walked by the river. The air was warm, still filled with the hum of life. Music drifting from a nearby bar, laughter from people sitting on benches. Frances walked beside me, swinging her jacket lightly by one finger. "You know what I like about you?" she said suddenly. "What?" "You don't pretend you're fine when you're not. Most people fake it. You just exist." Honestly, I smiled. That's one way to put it. We stopped near the water. The reflection of the city lights rippled against the surface. She looked out and said quietly, "Sometimes we lose something good just to find what's right." I turned toward her. "You really believe that?" "I do now," she said, looking up at me. "You shouldn't look so surprised." "I'm not. I said though I was. Because in that second, I realized she meant every word, and she wasn't talking about anyone else but me. We kept walking. Our hands brushed once, then again, until finally, without thinking, I took hers. She didn't pull away. It wasn't romantic in the movie sense. It was simple. Two people realizing they didn't need to explain what was already happening. When I drove her home later, she leaned against the seat, quiet but smiling. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly. "For what?" "For letting it just be easy." I walked her to her door. She paused, turned toward me and said, "Kevin, don't overthink this. It doesn't have to mean anything complicated. Sometimes two people just find by each other when they need to." She touched my arm lightly, said goodnight, and went inside. I stood there a minute, staring at her door. For once, I didn't feel like I was betraying Grace or rushing into something new. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about filling an empty space. It just felt right. That weekend, Frances and I spent the afternoon at a small art fair downtown. She showed me the kind of paintings she used to make. Abstract, colorful, messy. I stopped because I thought no one cared, she said. "Now I kind of want to start again." "You should," I said. "It suits you." Later, we found a food truck and shared fries, laughing when one fell into the street. There was no awkwardness, no need to perform with her. Everything felt unforced. That night, I got home and saw a missed call from Grace. My chest tightened. I didn't call back. I told myself I'd deal with it tomorrow, but she texted a few minutes later. "Can we meet? Just to talk." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part knew I couldn't. There were still unanswered pieces between us. When I told Frances the next day, she didn't react with jealousy or suspicion. She just nodded and said, "You should go. Sometimes people need to say things out loud to let them go." Wow. Her calmness caught me off guard. "You're okay with that?" She smiled. "Kevin, you and I aren't a secret contract. Go get your closure." That night, I met Grace at the same cafe where Frances and I had first talked. Grace looked nervous, clutching her cup with both hands. "I've been thinking a lot," she said. "I think I made a mistake." I listened quiet. She said she missed me, that she'd panicked, that she still loved me. I waited until she was done, then said carefully, "I don't hate you, Grace. I never could, but I think the moment we lost, it was before you said no. It was when you stopped seeing me the way you used to." She looked down, eyes glassy. "Is there someone else?" I hesitated. "There's someone who's been kind to me, that's all." She nodded slowly. "Then I guess that's my answer." When I left the cafe, I texted Frances, "It's done, you okay?" "Yeah." "Strangely, yeah, good." She wrote because I bought movie tickets. "You're coming." That night, sitting next to her in the dark theater, I realized something simple but true. Healing doesn't always look like crying or therapy or time. Sometimes it looks like laughter in the middle of a movie with someone who showed up when you least expected them. It had been 3 weeks since the night I met Grace at that cafe. 3 weeks since I'd closed that chapter and quietly stepped into a new one I never planned to start. Frances didn't ask for details and I didn't offer any. She just showed up the next day like always with coffee, a smile, and that calm energy that made everything feel lighter. We'd started spending most evenings together. Sometimes we cooked at my place. Sometimes we walked through the neighborhood talking about everything and nothing. There wasn't any rush, no labels, no declarations. But there was peace, real quiet peace. One evening we were sitting on my porch, the sky fading from orange to deep blue. She had her legs tucked under her and was holding her cup with both hands. "You seem different," she said. "Better or worse?" "Better," she said. "You used to talk like life was something that was happening to you. Now you sound like you're actually in it." I smiled. "I guess I'm learning." She looked over at me. "You know, I was worried in the beginning that you were just trying to fill the space Grace left." I thought about that too. I admitted, "But it's not that what I feel with you. It doesn't come from trying to fix something broken. It's just there." She didn't answer right away. She just nodded, her eyes soft. Then she said quietly, "I wasn't supposed to meet you this way, but I'm glad I did." That sentence stayed with me long after she left that night. The next weekend, Grace texted me again. Not to get back together, Just a short message saying she was moving to Chicago for a new job. I wish you well, she wrote. I mean that. I stared at her name on the screen, feeling no anger, no sadness, just closure. I typed, take care, Grace. You'll do great. And that was the end. No drama, no goodbye in person. Just two people finally letting go of what no longer fit. That same day, Frances invited me to an art gallery opening. She'd started painting again, something she hadn't done in years. Don't expect much, she warned me over text. I'm just showing two pieces. The gallery was small, tucked between a bookstore and a bakery. I found her near the back, talking to one of the organizers. When she saw me, her face lit up. You came? Of course I did. On the wall beside her were two canvases. One was abstract, a blur of blue and gray tones that somehow felt peaceful and heavy at the same time. The other was simpler, a small figure standing alone on a bridge, city lights in the distance. I didn't need to ask who it was about. They're beautiful, I said quietly. She smiled. They're about starting over, about the things we don't plan for but end up needing. When the crowd thinned out later, we stepped outside. The evening air was cool, carrying the smell of baked bread from next door. Frances leaned against the brick wall, looking at the lights across the street. So what now? She asked. I laughed. That's a big question. I mean, for you, you've gone through a lot in a short time. I think I'm done trying to make sense of everything you do. I said, I just want to live it. She nodded slowly. That's probably the best plan anyone could have. We stood there in silence for a while. Cars passed. Someone laughed from a nearby patio. Then I turned to her and said, you know, I never told you this. But the night Grace said no, it felt like my life just stopped. Everything I thought was solid fell apart in 10 seconds. I can imagine, she said softly. But now when I think about it, I don't feel broken anymore. I feel grateful. She raised an eyebrow. Grateful for heartbreak. For where it led me, I said. Her smile widened. Small but real. Careful. That almost sounds like a confession. Maybe it is. For a second, she just looked at me, eyes searching mine. Then she reached out and touched my cheek lightly. You really mean that? I do, I said. She stepped closer, still holding my gaze. Then say it again. I'm grateful, I said quietly, for everything that went wrong, because it brought me to you. That was the moment she leaned in and kissed me. Slow, steady, certain. No hesitation, no overthinking. Just two people who'd been through enough to recognize something real when they found it. Afterwards, she rested her head against my chest. You know what's funny? She said. I almost didn't text you that night. I thought it would be inappropriate. Grace's ex and all that. I laughed softly. Guess you made the right call. I guess I did. We walked to my car hand in hand. No big declarations, no promises about forever. Just a quiet understanding that we didn't need to define it to make it real. When I got home later, I opened my drawer, pulled out the ring box, and looked at it one last time. Then I closed it, walked outside, and dropped it into the donation bin behind the building. Not out of bitterness, but because it didn't belong to that version of my life anymore. That night, Frances called me before bed. Hey, she said softly. Just so you know, I would have said yes, I smiled, lying back on the couch. Yeah, I said, I know. Sometimes the greatest heartbreaks are disguised doorways to the life we were truly meant for. Kevin's story reminds us that a no isn't the end. It's a redirection. When Grace turned down his proposal, the pain felt final, a future erased in a single breath. Yet in that hollow space, kindness arrived uninvited. A text from Frances, a shared coffee, a laugh that didn't need permission. What began as comfort quietly grew into something deeper. Not because it replaced what was lost, but because it was simply right. The ring box in the donation bin wasn't bitterness. It was closure. Proof that letting go can be an act of gratitude. Life rarely follows our scripts, but it often writes better ones when we stop forcing the pen. Rejection, timing, even the ache of goodbye, these aren't punishments. They're the universe clearing the stage for the person who won't need a second chance to say yes. So if you're nursing a scar tonight, remember, the story isn't over at the heartbreak. It's just beginning where the light finally finds you. What's your moment of unexpected grace after a no? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Trelane brings real twists every week because your next chapter might be one click away.